Okay, so out of curiosity, because I remember my first interaction with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What was yours? Because mine was very corporate.
Yeah, mine was more, I guess, theology.
And in case anyone has never seen it, it looks like a colorful pyramid. Like it almost looks like the food pyramid. Um, and at the base of it, there's the physiological stuff. There's air, food, water, clothing, reproduction. Like the animal stuff is like the very bottom of the pyramid. Like you can't build up above that unless you have like you can't exceed that unless you have like your body is taken care of basically. And then you have safety needs above that. And that's like employment, resources, health, property, security. And you can't worry about the next step above you unless you have the bottom steps. Like, and when I say worry, I mean that word pretty precisely. It's if you don't have something taken care of below it that is more important and will keep you alive, then the next step is not even thinkable. Like your brain can't track it. And then of course above safety, if anyone's seen this pyramid, is love and belonging. That's like family, friendship, sense of connection. And then once you have secured your relationships and you have that sense of connection, love and belonging, the next step of the pyramid above that is esteem, meaning people who like feel like they belong and feel like they already have love. They start figuring out how to get recognition and status within their community.
They start becoming philanthropists and stuff.
Yeah.
art collectors and philanthropists.
they get above the live, laugh, love phase of their life. They attend operas to network with people. I don't know if they do. I've never. Yeah,
we're not there yet, right?
We're not there yet. And then the final stage, the top stage, according to Maslow, is self-actualization.
Self-actualization means the making real of the inner self, and that means what you love, what you're interested in, what excites you, what fascinates you, and that is the cause outside yourself, which paradoxically then becomes a defining characteristic of the self.
And that's kind of what Maslow, as a old famous psychologist, that's what he invented basically, is the notion of self-actualization. And when I first heard about it, it was in a very corporate setting. Like we were, everybody at my company had been handed the book EQ, Emotional Quotient, and it was very good and very life-changing. And they were also handed a colorful binder with like some of the printouts from EQ, like almost like a workbook they had put together for it. And in that, just thrown in there, was Maslow's hierarchy. It was just it looked like the food pyramid. And it was like, here are the needs you have, or the needs you need to take care of before you can start thinking about something as huge as self-actualization. So when I say the word self-actualization, what do you think of? Because I realized everybody has a different notion of it.
Self-awareness, like measuring where you're at in life with your peers and your group. That's ceiling is, what your room is. I guess I would think we all have different ceilings and different rooms and different challenges and different strengths and different shelter.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. What a ceiling is a good way of putting it, especially with the people that Maslow thought would have achieved actualization. Maslow listed 3 people specifically. The psychologist Maslow was like, Albert Einstein, he definitely reached self-actualization. He busted the top of his ceiling and basically invented new ways to think about physics. On his list also were like Abraham Lincoln, who was just like, there's not much to say about Abe Lincoln except for he led the nation, and he did that despite having crippling depression. And several things holding him back in life. I think he had Eleanor Roosevelt on his list. But it was interesting looking at his list, because like when I first heard the term self-actualization, it kind of felt too corporate jargony to me. It almost felt like somebody telling you to like, exceed your bounds, or like realizing your potential. That's a good one. Like that's an old one. But the idea is that like only a few people have managed to do it, and that they were only able to do it because they had their lower needs sorted out. So I guess
Do
now,
you get some traction on this? Like, then that's why he's famous, is because people started to read him and try to put this. Well, obviously, if it's in books that you're reading at work years later.
yeah, well, that's exactly what happened. Is he wrote this as a way to sort of explain, how humans can like free themselves of the stuff they're stuck in and free themselves of the lower needs they have, and how they can do something truly remarkable in their life, and how they can really rise above what they're programmed to be able to do by biology.
What it amounted to for me was learning to see through the eyes of lofty people, to understand what motivated them, to understand what they valued and what they didn't value. Each of these were texts which I could then pursue in this pioneering research style. It's kind of innovative research.
And a corporation took it over. They saw this pyramid. Like, he was a well-known psychologist, and he's well known for having a lot of really good insights. But Maslow was not. He wasn't as corporate savvy as ad agencies were, and a guy named McGregor, who basically like made the pyramid. Maslow's pyramid never existed as a physical pyramid. So if some corporate overboss or if somebody in like Psych 101 hands you a pyramid and says this is Maslow's pyramid, that's not true. He had a hierarchy, but then the management professor took it and made it into a graphic, and that's what we
Some
recognize today.
ambitious Irishman said, "I can do this. We can make a buck doing this."
Right, exactly.
We gotta make it colorful
and the original sort of pyramid was critiqued by the psychology community. It was thought of as overgeneralized, lacking self-critique and simplification. For example, McGregor reported that human behavior was driven by various needs, and once a need was met, you stopped driving that behavior. Like, he thought that if somebody had food, water, and shelter, that those things no longer motivated a worker, because he was thinking about it from a management perspective. Maslow didn't think that. He didn't think that like you got over the thing that you had accomplished. Like, it's not like you stopped needing to work for food and you're like, okay, I'll never think about food again. But
yeah, but as you've been more comfortable in life, and you've been on all socially on the economic scale, I think you think of things a lot less, and you just start worrying
yeah,
about what's at that level or whatever floor you're on that elevator, right? You don't
right.
worry about those things like you used to. You don't worry about clothes and food like you used to. Now you worry about if your boss likes you, and that takes up a majority of your mind. It makes sense to me.
Right, exactly. But like the marketing guru McGregor, he thought you literally got over those lower stages like it was a level in a video game.
Oh, is it
Um, and he thought that not only that, but like his work could be sort of extracted to say that if somebody got too high on the pyramid, you could no longer motivate them with money. Like, he was scared of that like if somebody got to like they had their safety needs met, they felt loved and belonged, like they had gotten maybe to the esteem part of their life where they're trying to get recognition and freedom and respect, and he's like, oh my god, they're past the safety needs and the psychology needs. They don't need my money anymore. How am I going to motivate them to keep working for me?
Well, that's not true, because we know food and sex are such huge motivators to people at every level, right?
Right.
Food is always a pleasure number one of doing anything, right? It's always a great reward, whether you're a billionaire or
Right. And the
a
richest
toddler. you know
and the richest men today, they still want more money. So like, yeah, this obviously does not hold up, but it has structured a lot of how we deal with people in corporation now. It's vitally important today because if you chip away at somebody's hierarchy and start removing things like access to internet, or let's just throw this one out there, access to health coverage, if you start taking away parts of the pyramid for somebody, one, we can't access the upper parts of the pyramid. We can't self-actualize. We can't become an Einstein or an Abraham Lincoln or whatever if somebody has broken the blocks on our lower part of our pyramid. And two, the idea that you can make somebody more motivated by making them hungry or by making them need medical coverage or something, we've adopted that. That's not a theoretical thing. That's how we operate corporate, like that's how we operate businesses in America now. We make sure that if they don't have a job, they can't access health coverage, or if they don't have, and by the way, this is not me saying we need universal anything. What I'm saying is we've made a business model out of making the lower parts of somebody's pyramid disappear
Well, that
if they don't work hard enough.
isn't that the trick of business, is to pay people just enough that they won't leave and not more than that.
Yeah.
So, so they're more comfortable and do less work and less, and keep them a little bit scared for their job, just a little bit.
Right, exactly. And that is one of the questions we're going to ask today is if somebody chips away at that lower block, the basic needs, is it just jobs that do that? Like can a job motivate you by taking away some of those basic needs or making you dependent on the job for it? But it's even more than that. We've talked about the economy of uh, the way people handle billing. Like we had an episode about errand fatigue, where businesses are built around you not having enough time to read all of your junk mail in a day and sending you, United Health Coverage just yesterday sent me another statement of how my coverage works. Like, and it's the fourth one in the last couple of months. So I'm like, they're changing it all the time. They know I can't sit there and read, a 4,000 word statement every week from them. And same thing with being billed by like different clinics. You don't know what they're billing you for. You can't read all that. And same thing with work. They send you, everything you use on your computer has a terms of service. Like everything is basically designed to flood you, to stress you, and to make you less able to read, watch, and monitor everything.
Yeah, information overload is what it is.
Right, and if any of those wins, it knocks out a block on your lower pyramid. It slowly that flood erodes your access to the basic necessities, or at worst, it chips away at your safety, your employment, your resources, your health, your property. And if you're on too much Facebook and social media, and if you get bullied, or if people attack you for your political beliefs, or if you are on Facebook and people start giving you horrible facts and figures to convince you that you should watch their videos, your third rung on your hierarchy starts getting eroded. That's your love and belonging. Your sense of connection gets eroded. Your family stops asking your opinions about politics because you go off the handle and say some weird shit. Like, so what I'm saying is that our quest today, and what we want to find out is what is eroding our hierarchy of needs. If we get to our higher self, if we ever actually achieve self-actualization, or if we even glimpse it, can we hang on to it while other business models are built to erode it? And or do we fall back down to our lowest level of need? The idea, there's a notion that I am evolved. I am a high thinking, high functioning human. I'm educated. I'm thoughtful. I've taken a lot of time trying to get to that higher point. But if you take away my house, and if you take away the money in my bank, and you take away my health insurance, do I sink back down? Do I just become another criminal willing to steal because I literally can't eat or survive without it? Am I willing to commit fraud? Am I willing to, rob my own business? Like, do we sink back down? And not just criminality either. Like, do we start making rash, stupid decisions because we can't focus? If we don't want to think of ourselves as like, well, I would never do a crime. Well, yeah, but you would do quick, impulsive things if you needed to. So that's one of our big questions today is if we achieve self-actualization, can we lose it given bad circumstances? We've never covered this topic, and it's one of the often trotted out staples of self-help. I don't think you can read a self-help book without somebody mentioning Maslow's hierarchy.
I always like when psychologists do anything, and I'm on and off about psychology. as a good way of getting better. But anytime I see anything, a documentary, when they put it just gives it so much more credibility,
Yeah.
especially a famous psychologist is ding, 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 ding. I probably give it more weight than I should.
I think I probably give it more weight than I should, even knowing it was like the idea was perverted by a corporate shill, a management professor. Um, yeah, I think I give it more weight just because I've seen it at work. If something shows up in my professional life and it's being handed to me by like a manager, I'm more I give it more credibility or authority.
It just always seems to me, Joe, that psychologists by trade, just by their build, they just seem to be this person that was really taken good care of, had well-to-do parents, never mowed a lawn, never worked at McDonald's. You know what I mean?
Right.
They just don't have any dents in the armor. Is that? I know it's not true, but
It's yeah. How could you tell me what to do with my life if you've never had a real hard time? This,
exactly.
and the field of psychology is so broad. I know that a lot of our episodes end up touching on psychology because it's so closely tied to self-help, and a lot of self-help gurus will grab elements of psychology and like use it. But the reason why we go to psychology so often is because there are two sides of psychology. There's two ends of it. On the one far side, there is the idea that psychologists are professional friends. You hire someone to listen to you talk for an hour a week, and like it's almost like paying somebody to be your buddy and just to listen to you.
Yeah, that's exactly what the gym people are, the personal trainers. They're
Yeah,
like or the person that cuts your hair, same thing. Yeah.
yeah. Why not pay for a good haircut once a week instead? But on the other end of psychology is it's a necessary field, and they look into people's brains quite literally, and they figure out what triggers us, and the field of psychology has helped humanity improve its mental health considerably since it started. It's gone through a lot of phases of quackery, and but it's like but in general, like any science, it is
That's everything
slowly,
has, yeah.
yeah, it's slowly getting better, and the results speak for themselves. Like we have better ways of training people to be resilient. We have better ways of making people more effective at work. We really do have a lot of like
Understanding criminals.
Yeah, understanding criminals,
protecting society from mentally health people and criminals.
Right. Despite how many movies and shows about serial killers there are, we're actually quite good at catching them thanks to forensic psychology. So like there are elements of the field which earn the reputation for their professional friends, but we try to draw from areas of psychology where it has really good studies, huge groups of people who were tested, and like good sample sizes, all that stuff. So man, we're starting so many episodes nowadays with defending science, but we are drawing from Maslow. He's a pretty well established dude. You've probably encountered him at work because somebody has thrown a colorful pyramid picture at your nose or onto your screen. And the idea, I think, now tell me if I'm wrong, I think one of the core ideas behind Maslow's hierarchy is it's almost like proof that you can bootstrap your way up from poverty. Because at the base of the pyramid is getting your essentials taken care of. Like at the base of this pyramid is, air, water, food, clothing. And then the second rung is employment, resources, health, property, security. So like this is almost telling you that if you start taking care of your basic needs and you start out at the bottom, you can actually bring yourself up.
As a young person, I thought it was all about work. I thought it was just, I didn't think it had anything to do with who your parents were. I almost thought the opposite. I thought if you had a tough life, you'd have a better chance. You're equipped for battle.
Yeah.
But now, as an older person, I'm starting to see the results of how the game plays all the way out. See the end of the movie.
Right. This is actually how the episode started. Is I was asking myself this question, that if you and I bootstrap our way up from poverty, does that make it harder for us, you and I, to reach actualization? Is it one of those things where like the grind and the hard work, does that condition you to work harder? Like, is it easier to reach actualization because you're used to working hard? And it's like, well, I'll get through the last rung. I'll get to actualization because I'm a rung climber now. Like I'm used to breaking through these levels like it is a video game. Or is it that you start out so far ahead if you have wealth that like that doesn't even matter? But that led to a more important question. Like I wish I had an answer for that was very clear and simple of like, yes, if you are born wealthy, you reach actualization faster. Like if we had a statistic for it, that'd be nice. But I couldn't find one. I couldn't find anything that said whether or not poverty made you actualize slower. What I did find is a lot of evidence that when like for large populations, I found a lot of evidence for if you have a huge group of people and you start lowering their standard of living and you start pushing them into poverty, or you start pushing them off of health coverage, or if you take a huge population and you start moving them away from having access to the lower rungs of the hierarchy of needs, it makes people less able to actualize as a large group. Like we start reverting to basic needs. One of the examples I have, I was watching YouTube comedians, and one comedian commented that there was a time we locked migrants in cages, and yet in the same breath on the same news program they were complaining that like these people were getting free meals and free toothbrushes while in detainment. and it's like, yeah, well, if we feel like we have nothing, you and I, Todd, if we have a hard time and life throws us nothing but lemons, and it feels like we have nothing, we can't focus on being our best selves. We see somebody else in a cage and they're getting free stuff while we're paying $10 for bargain cream cheese. It feels really bad. It's like at
Well,
least they're getting free food and we're not.
try this. This is working for me right now. If we take actualization back, you say it for me,
Yeah, self-actualization.
take it out of the world and then take it down to the family. And I think in each family we've seen somebody who has, and that's the thing, it's being the best version of yourself. And I think when you do that, there's usually some person in the family who is overachieved, right?
Yeah.
And usually one that's underachieved. Like I can look at it in that. Not that it's a competition, but you can say, this person did the most with the same,
Well, first of all, it's as if they had clear eyes. They seemed to see more, they were more perspicuous. They could see, I remember one of the things that I was so impressed with first was they could see through phonies. They couldn't be fooled somehow. They could spot, you couldn't con them. There was that. And then they didn't seem to come in with a prioris. That is, whatever a thing was, it was. Where for most people, they've got some sort of preconception about it, about what it ought to be, or what it might be, or what the book says it should be, and so on.
Now, there's another part of this where I want to talk to you about like a couple of historic examples of actualization. I went looking for people who self-actualized, who actually did reach the top, and due to financial problems or drug abuse, they got knocked back down. They fully lost their cognitive mental ability to self-actualize. They lost the spark or what allowed them to do what they were doing. And a lot of them are like writers and artists. Sylvia Plath was one of them. She went through huge, crazy depression, and like challenges motherhood and eventually committed suicide. So it's like, yeah, no, that she had her actualized mind taken away. F. Scott Fitzgerald, his wife Zelda had mental illness, like, and historically that kind of like messed with his ability to write, and he had health problems and financial instability. Nina Simone, Ernest Hemingway made this list for sure because of his depression and alcoholism, and Basquiat, the artist, famously substance abuse, exploitation, and the art world basically like slowly eroding his ability to make money. So it's like self-actualized. The reason why these people fall into this category is because Being self-actualized means you have originality and creativity, and strong moral values and a sense of purpose. So if you fit those bills, if you actually have gotten, creativity and originality and strong moral purpose, and you feel like you have gotten to the thing in life that you need to be doing, just ask yourself, like, if you had a really high bill come through, like your house got damaged, or like if you had a high medical bill, could that take that away from you? Like, is there a strain big enough to make you like knocked down a peg to where you couldn't focus anymore? From my own health experiences, I know that's true for me. Like, it wouldn't take much, actually.
This list of people you went through, I can't help but thinking, and then we, did study for this episode of Vincent van Gogh. It seems like people who can connect arts wise this deep are just so ultra sensitive, that
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That they can express these feelings and create these amazing things, but inside they're just 10 times more sensitive than most people. I don't know if sensitive is the right word, or just
emotionally risk taking, I think.
Do you know what I mean? They're deeper than most.
Yeah. And that's
they have to be to create that kind of art, right? Because for people to understand.
Yeah. And if like Abraham Lincoln's on this list, man, that guy was resilient as hell. Like, so like maybe it is the artists that are more susceptible to losing their actualization.
We know how sensitive Abraham Lincoln was. Abraham Lincoln was weeping in the White House, and
curled
depressed.
up in a chair. But he could come back. Like that showed a resilience enough to like return. And some of these artists on this list, they just don't.
Right. He didn't kill himself. Someone killed him. He didn't.
Yeah.
He was still in the fight.
So speaking of mentioning Van Gogh, do you think that he lost his? Because like, if we're talking about like bills and depression and substance abuse can make you lose self-actualization, he hits all of those, right?
Yeah. He just had a life that was just challenging, and his success was he died young. He died 37. His success was in about a 3-year period. Now, I think it's important to include that he had his brother supported him, sponsored him his whole life, and never ever gave up on him and kept investing. Did you hear about his brother?
I did. I heard about the parts where his brother like was an art dealer or owned an art dealership or something like that.
He did. He came from a family of people who are art dealers and artists, and he had half of them were kind of artsy type, and the other part were extreme. His father was a Protestant preacher, which was rare at the time because where he lived, Dutch was mostly all Catholic. So they were very conservative, but they were artists. And then that's all his brother had ever done. So his brother was well-to-do. And he knew that his brother could become an artist, that he had that, but he had to support him for years without it really getting anything in return. He didn't get a painting to sell from him until the guy was 33. So he was one of those like angel funders of his brother, whatever his brother wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not poor. Like we'll start right there. Is this an example of somebody who reached self-actualization because they had a leg up? And it sounds like he kind of had a leg up.
Well, Vincent van Gogh sought out people who had hard lives. And so he started trying to become a religious person, and he just always troubled with social skills. He would bring people close to him, and then he would drive them crazy and drive them away. He just was very emotionally unintelligent. He would ask a woman to marry a woman that was mourning the death of her husband. He would inappropriately ask her to marry him right then. And she'd say, no. Yeah. And then when she'd say no, he would threaten her, harass, I guess you'd almost say stalk, to the point where he'd get chased off. And he did this multiple times through his life. So he had a hard time. He also had times in his life where he knew the importance of learning. So he would kind of go on these pilgrimage. Help me speak here.
Pilgrimage.
And to get around to go to places to train with other, like you do with writing, your writer groups. He'd do that in art groups. But then when he'd get there, he'd be so difficult. He'd seek these people out that he wanted to work with, that he respected, and then he would obsessively drive them away and fight with them and ruin that relationship. So he had a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors.
Okay. While you were going through the early life of Van Gogh, did it seem like it would be too much to overcome? Like, because like we know what he eventually becomes. We know that he paints some of the most amazing things humans have ever laid their eyes on. But early on, with all this immaturity, where you're like, you're never going to reach actualization. Like, how did you get beyond the basic steps of like emotional security and connection?
I think he was just such a lifelong. He would go and stay with people in poorhouses. I don't know if have you ever seen what Victorian poorhouses were like?
Weirdly, I have not. Like, you'd think that would be something I'd research. I know they existed.
Horrible. They're places where they'd put people, and it was almost like how it was referred to. It was like punishment for the poor. And these places were full of lice and mice, vermin. They didn't have plumbing. They were just absolutely disgusting. They were horrible places to live, and masses lived in them. And he would, even though he did have means, he would stay there and paint these people and observe these people and appreciate these people. So he had love for kind of everybody, for people who've had hard times. And he sought out and married a prostitute who had syphilis, who was, the low of the low, alcoholic, single mom. I mean, and then he would paint her. So he got in these very uncomfortable, unhealthy relationships. Anyone who's lived with an alcoholic prostitute with syphilis.
So he was attracted to misery.
Absolutely. So, that's a good way of putting it.
That is so damn
what
weird.
good comes out of this? There's so many nice girls in town. It's it. I'll give you an example of how stubborn he was. He was in the school to become a pastor, to become a religious leader, but he refused to learn Latin. Now, this is a man who already spoke 4 languages and learned 4 languages easy. He was very intelligent, but he just didn't think that there was any reason to speak a dead language. So he said all words should be alive. So that just shows you a little bit about his mindset. Like, that was the last thing he had to do to graduate. He refused to.
That is hilarious. Hey, actually, we did an episode about William Jennings Bryan recently, and he didn't like the Latin part. So like, maybe there's a connection there. That makes me feel a little bit better that he knew so many languages, though. That tells me it wasn't just lazy. Like, I'm gonna go philander with the prostitute some more. It's like, no, he knew, he was smart. Like yeah.
And he was sweet too. I mean, he said about that woman, he said, she's disgusting to others, but she's beautiful in my eyes. And that's how he kind of saw everybody. He saw people that had hard lives as still beautiful, even though the rest of the world saw them as damaged goods. Now, when he got deeper in his career, and he started actually really, really producing. So he kept his relationship with his brother's brother, supported financially, emotionally, his every whim. He then, similar to Hemingway, he would drink cheap alcohol. He got addicted to turpentine.
Whoa.
So, yeah, he would drink it. And so this is a drug addict, right? And so it's very common when he's hanging out with his painter buddies, they eat paint chips, and then when they paint, they take the paintbrushes and they dip them in their mouth after every stroke. Well, that's lead in there.
Right.
So it's very unhealthy.
Yeah, famously he had lead poisoning, and also I think, what was it? Do you have neurosyphilis? Like Bram Stoker?
Yeah.
Okay.
He did, yeah.
So if there are people listening to this and are like, why was he so insane? It was like, well, he it kind of reminds me of the math equation. Like, one train leaves a station at 5 o'clock going 80 miles an hour. One train leaves a station at 40 miles an hour at 7. Whatever the equation is, it's like, when do they meet? It's Van Gogh starts life with a brilliant mind, speaking multiple languages, painting like nobody's ever seen before, and at the same time he has neurosyphilis and he's lead poisoning himself and drinking crazy. When do those two things meet? Like, when does he lose the brilliance and the depression and addiction take over?
Like it kind of goes down the hill, like there's this peak
Right.
and then you go down. The thing about cutting off his ear is what he's famous for, right?
Yeah.
And he had a very famous artist staying with him, and they would just fight all the time. And finally he drive this guy away. He needed this guy to stay with him because he was just a creative influence, and they did some of his best work with him. But he just was so obsessive. So he chased the guy down the street with a razor, but then it seemed like, I'm going to murder you. But then he went back to his room and cut his ear off. And he almost bled to death. So it was a cry for help. It was a suicide attempt. Because back then, it doesn't take much to check out. There's no antibiotics or,
Right. What a weird way to like. I wonder if he was just like, if I cut off my ear, it will show him I didn't actually mean to cut him, and it's like a repentance. Or if he was just like, I know the ear bleeds a lot.
Well, in his self-actualization, so we don't know where his madness was at this point, right? Where his mental health was. We know it's probably we're down the hill at this point. The big turning point towards the end of his life. And he's really being productive at this point. He's in his mid-30s. This is his most productive years. This is when his stuff's actually starting to have some value, and it didn't have value until he was gone, but everyone knew that he was heading in the right direction if he could have stuck around. His brother Theo, who's his biggest supporter, gets married, and Vincent doesn't see this coming, and he's shocked, right? And he emotionally is having a hard time handling this. Now, you would think, your brother gets married. You're what, Joe? Happy, right? He's going to have a kid, and they have a baby. So he's an uncle, and he's very proud, and he gets to go see this. And then the brother takes him aside and says, hey, I'm going to need you to, not spend quite as much money. He's not cutting him off. He's just saying, you got to take it easy, because I have a family now.
Slow down a little bit.
Yeah. And Vincent is shocked by this, Joe. Like, stunned. Like, what do you mean? Like, he thought this... He's like, it's your job to take care of me. So he was almost like a disabled. He was almost like a sibling. That's he was like his kid, right? Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And is that common? I can't imagine it would be.
It may be in like extremely wealthy households, but like I don't think that's normal.
That the oldest brother takes care of you forever, no matter what you do. Usually, you'd have to work in the family business or something, is what I figured. I did,
Right. I think there's also the misconception that like Van Gogh's paintings were so stunning and so good, and there's so many of them, he must have been making a ton of money, and that's not the case. He basically lived in poverty the whole time. Like his brother was like, slow down on the spending, but from what I understood, especially like when he stayed cooped up in a hovel making sunflowers for ages, he was drinking cheap wine, and he was living off pretty meager amounts.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. That was the last straw for him. He kind of saw that, probably in his own head, he couldn't continue at this pace of living. So he took a handgun and he shot himself in the chest. But he didn't die. It missed his heart and it lodged in his spine. He walks back home after shooting himself in the chest, and then he dies days later. But it's like, this guy was just literally torturing himself. Even he tried to kill himself twice, and it just maimed himself and made him be even more pain.
Wow. I'm trying to think of like.
I'm sorry, I just loaded that all on you. I've been very.
Oh no, that's okay.
This is just so much. So many things happen between all that, and all of it's just dirty, rotten. Just
yeah. So my question, and I knew going into this when I I just jotted the name Van Gogh into this because it showed up on the list of like who's achieved Maslow's hierarchy, but has also lost it. Like that was our criteria. Our list was who has reached reached their maximum potential, and then let that slip away from them. And how did that happen? He was just on our list, and he was like the most interesting person we could think of, basically. But he certainly showed signs of having reached self-actualization. I know we kind of quickly buzzed through a lot of his history because a lot of people already know about Van Gogh, but like somewhere in that giant mess, he really did amazing things.
He did, and he sought things out. He sought out learning from the best, and he was intelligent enough to know what to do with it. He knew when art was changing. He recognized when it went to colors and light, even though he was trained a certain classical way. So he had vision as well, and he put himself in extreme situations to learn, to be to see life, and somebody I really respect.
Yeah. To put it into perspective about how well he did at his peak when he had reached self-actualization, he actually got to the point where he produced over 2,000 works of art. And if you haven't looked recently at a Van Gogh, just look up Starry Night or Sunflowers or any of those big ones, and it's like, oh yeah, no, those are now sort of like Starry Night was on every college dorm wall that I could remember. It was like that and Che Guevara in college.
And the original's worth $100 million. So
Yeah.
value.
So he certainly passed the creativity or the mastery test of self-actualization.
And the sad thing about that is Theo, his brother, died 6 months after him of disease and a broken heart, missing his brother. But his wife, his widow, Theo's, threw away a lot, just crates and crates of Van Gogh's work.
Holy shit!
Yeah, which is that's a shame. And then,
like, disposed of it, like threw,
yeah,
like,
just threw it out. Took it to Goodwill,
Oh, holy shit! That's crazy. I didn't know about that. Like, I know that there were missing Van Goghs. I didn't know there were like crates of them. A couple other I want to mention these briefly. A couple other markers that we know that tells us Van Gogh probably reached self-actualization was he had passion, like a deep commitment. He had what's called intrinsic motivation. Clearly, he was not painting for fame or money. In his lifetime, to give you perspective, he only ever sold one of his paintings. So, like, he was not doing this for cash. Like, he was strictly relying on the small amount his brother was giving him. And he just thought that being creative was the highest achievement. I will not hold myself to that standard, by the way. Like, I do a lot of writing contests and things, but I also feel inside that, like, eventually I will sell books. Like I don't. I want to be creative and strictly to do it for an art form, but we also respect professionals who want to get paid for something that they've mastered. And of course, like a self-actualization has a spiritual element too. And for Van Gogh, that seemed like it was his connection to nature and beauty and the suffering of other people. When you saw the Maslow's hierarchy pyramid, did you think it was a roadmap? Because when it was given to me, I was like, I got to do all these things. Like,
it does. It seems like a lot of work. It seems hard to maintain, and that's what you're talking about. The graduating levels of it. I think it's kind of like a fluid thing. It goes up and down.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot of work, right? Just to stay rested enough to do all this. One lifetime might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, like you're phrasing there, rested. Like, let's just talk about like sleep for a second. Your physiological needs, they shift every day. If I have too many, like we adopt a new kitten. It's kept me up for the last couple of days, and I'm like, well, there goes my physiological needs. Like, I am a mess right now. But like every one of these blocks in the pyramid, physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization. Every one of those 4 blocks that come before actualization, they shift day to day, and they can be changed, threatened, or lowered or raised just by circumstance. We had a freeze here in Texas. Everybody had a freeze. Like the whole U.S. froze over this last week, and we lost water and power several times. And it was just like, well, I'm not a writer today because I can't access my computer. So I took notes on like a notepad for what I could do. But I was like, yeah, that's a block in my list of my hierarchy down.
Meanwhile, 150 years ago, Van Gogh is sitting in just filth and rats, and he's got scabs on his face. Hasn't eaten in 3 days, but he's still working away, Joe. You should feel ashamed of yourself. Calling yourself an artist is
barely, yeah,
a stretch.
You're like, have you chased anyone recently with a razor? I don't think so.
Where your drunk alcoholic prostitute wife with syphilis is throwing things at you when you're trying to paint.
I know. I'm very soft compared to Van Gogh and his abilities. I did want to sort of like take us out on a positive note and really honestly a better way to look at Maslow's hierarchy. If this whole episode could be summarized in one way, I don't think we should look at it as a pyramid. And there's a cognitive scientist, Scott Barry Kaufman, who also thinks we should stop drawing pyramids just altogether. Stop drawing pyramids. Like this is not a pyramid structure. It's easy to visualize, but it's not a very good. It's not level. So what he says in his book is, this isn't like a video game. You don't reach the end of the level and like start the next one. You don't reach the end of your physical needs and you're like, well, that'll never happen again. Clap your hands together and keep moving and start moving through the next level. And he also says that Maslow never drew a pyramid. A corporation drew a pyramid. What I hadn't thought of, and something that Kaufman thought of, which I thought was very, very cool, he said we should think of a sailboat. That everybody's self-actualization, when it is fully put together, fully secure, fully rigged, fully masted, tied tightly, and we're all ready to go, you can sail on the horizon and go anywhere you want. It's a beautiful, like sunset moment. But first off, you need to feel safe and secure before you can go anywhere. And all those steps on the hierarchy, they shouldn't be thought of as steps. They are parts of the boat. And I thought that was a very, very smart way of looking at it. And here's a fun fact for everybody before we sort of like tie things off. Maslow thought there was a higher need or a higher level than self-actualization. He spent the last years of his life trying to put a higher level above self-actualization and becoming your best self and doing your best work. He thought there was going to be a way to put transcendence into his diagram. He wanted to sort of like indicate a level that's even higher than like you've done the best work of your life. He wanted to have like, well, what transcends that? He never fully finished that, but I thought that was a neat thought that like he was trying to work on a better diagram himself.
And he died too young. He died in 1970 of a heart attack at 62.
Yeah.
So that's a shame. Was Staten around then? I mean, I couldn't help but think that like that's
right.
Pre-Staten, right? That's like he was such a thoughtful and are you a fan of his? You are, right?
I am, yeah. Taken out by a physical need, ironically, but yes.
That's a good point.
And before we go, do you know anybody in your real life, in your personal life, that you suspect has achieved self-actualization?
And then lost it?
Or just somebody who has it.
I can identify a member of almost every family who's the mature person, the older brother, and sometimes it's a younger sister who is kind of the, that everyone borrows money from, everyone goes with advice, who worries about everybody, who's a parent when other people gone. But I had a gentleman that I worked with, and his family, it was a rural area, and they had a bunch of, they had a farm property, and a very unpopular decision, but they went and they had it voted to have it zoned as residential. So he went from being just a farm boy to being, he had $6 million.
Wow. Okay.
And I was there through the process, and there was some backlash because, you're selling the farm, and it affected the people around him. So he was outcast from that. But then he had $6 million, and he met a woman who he was head over heels, and he just had a bling about him. He was getting investments, and he's buying properties, and he was just growing, and financially, and he seemed like he was a different person. Like he'd really become a business person, a business leader. And we were to the point where we were sick of working with him, because we're like, well, you're a millionaire. We're on commission sales here. Get out of here,
Right.
And then when the relationship fizzled, she left him for another man. He couldn't handle that, and he ended up committing suicide.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, $6 million in the bank. I didn't think people would commit suicide over, and then he'd come so far and done so much, and he was on a winning streak, and it just all ended.
That's I think, unfortunately, I think the same way you do. I was immediately thinking, well, you've got money, you can find somebody else. But now I'm starting to realize that it really comes down to, I got to the top of what I could accomplish, and then parts of my pyramid went missing. Parts of my sailboat broke, and I can't live without that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. At the bottom part, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the people I've met who have self-actualized, like they very clearly had their magnum opus. They produced something, or wrote something, or made something of themselves in the corporate world that was so good that it just couldn't be denied that they had reached their peak. And that they acted with self-awareness, and they talked to you like they had a way about them of talking where it's like they seem like they not know everything, but they have a better handle on life than you do. And then I've seen those people sort of lose their mind slowly. Usually it's addiction, like what I've seen personally.
Well, give me a specific. I'll give you, if you can't think of one, I'll give you the Hemingway one to go over, since it's a writer. But do you have anybody creatively that you've seen that got there and then it was over because of addiction? Or
the biggest, I think the saddest moment I had, and I won't say his name, but I've told you that I was taking classes with him. There was a sci-fi writer who was in the New York Times bestseller list about 20 years ago. And I started taking classes. I got invited to classes with them, with a huge group of people. Like I was not the only, it was not mentoring. It was a huge class. But one of the classes, somebody asked them, "What are you working on now?" And their answer was, "I haven't felt happy while writing in years." And it crushed us all immediately. And they kept going. Like they kept prattling about the class. Like they just kind of moved on from that. And I don't even think they realized how sad what they said, how bad it affected us. But I was like, oh, you haven't produced anything since then. And you really did lose the part of it that made you happy. And I know that they had gone through really crazy like upsets in their life that had like knocked out other parts of their hierarchy. Like they were missing sections of it, and they talked about that. So it was just like, wow, it never struck me before that somebody who literally had all the money in the world and had the highest level of success you could get, to where like they had movies made about their books, and they could have that happen.
That's weird. That's a human moment, right? You're human too, right?
Yeah. Off mic, I will repeat the name to you, just so in case you forgot when I said that before. No, I talked about this months ago. You remember? Okay.
Yeah. But this is somebody is an expert and so established that they should be above these things, right?
But Hemingway, oh my God, that's the all-time great example of this. My example, the one that I was taking class with, he did not commit suicide. He's still out there, but like, yeah, Hemingway, that's a tough one.
You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.